Shalom, shalom, Israel, shalom. His brother Raya want to give all honor and glory to the Most High God, Yahweh, Bahashema Mashiach, Malak Yahushua. Another strong shalom to all of the mighty brothers that go out there and labor on the highways and byways, making their body a living sacrifice. In the rain, the tumults, the demons, the uprises, the uproars, out there standing 10 toes down for the name of the Lord. Another strong shalom to all of the mighty brothers that are not out there as of yet, but they're building themselves up, reading, praying, fasting, doing everything they could do to put themselves in a position to go out there to shake the hand and wake up the hopeful elect. Another strong shalom to all that are mighty akwaf in this thing, sincerely reverencing their husbands, being teachers of good things to the children at home, being quiet, shamefaced, submissive, loving, steadfast, cooking, sewing, cleaning, doing all of the righteous acts of our foremothers on fire for the Lord. Another strong shalom to all that are mighty akwaf that are not married as of yet, but building themselves up, reading, praying, fasting, doing everything they could do to magnify the Most High and the ministry. Another strong shalom to all of the mighty children in this thing, right? Zealous, on fire, right? Abstaining from all concupiscence, lust, and peer pressure, standing 10 toes down for the name of the Lord. And last but not least, another strong shalom to the 12 tribes scattered abroad, reading, praying, fasting, making their body a living sacrifice in the last days. Right? This is going to be an in-depth breakdown, right? I may touch on many things through the spirit, but New Testament history, right? How did the Israelites go into Turkey? Right? How did Israel spread throughout the four corners of the earth? Because a lot of people, they understand that Israel's all over the world, but they don't really understand how. But I'm gonna share my screen through the spirit, right? And most High willing, right? Brothers can see my screen. Right? Give me a strong con if you can see the screen. Right, so a lot of brothers know that Israel spread abroad throughout the four corners of the earth, but they don't understand how. How did it take place? And really, all of that history is in the Bible. A lot of that history, you want to go into other books and get under understandings, right? And go into libraries and things like that, Wikipedia, different links that can help break down the history, right? On different definitions and books, right? It's real good to go into that because it explains things. It gives a good understanding. Right, but also all of that history is found in the scriptures. It's the book of Proverbs, chapter 25, verse 2. It is the glory of God to conceal a thing, meaning the Most High conceals things. He doesn't show everybody everything, right? Everything isn't on a big pedestal for you to easily understand the scriptures or prophecy. But the honor of kings is to search out a matter. So it's the honor of kings to really search out these things to find out, how did the Israelites get into Turkey? How did the Israelites get throughout the four corners of the earth? How did the Israelites get, all the way in Syria and these different parts of the earth, right? With these different slave trades right, the diaspora of the Jews in different exiles, which they were spread to. Right, let's go to the mighty book of James, right? It's the mighty book of James, chapter 1 and verse number 1. James, a servant of Yahweh and of our Lord Yahushua, to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad. This is during the New Testament. So James and the early church and our fathers, these men understood that during this time, the Roman Empire, a lot of Israelites that were already spread abroad. Yeah, you have the northern kingdom that was spread abroad around 722 BC. When you go into it in that history in 2 Kings, the 17th chapter, right, and other books that we could dive into as well, I wanted to touch on that history. But also you have the Jews that were spread abroad, right? And they were spread abroad. It didn't just pick up in the New Testament. Because a lot of times, a lot of these Christians or men, they just pick up the Bible in the New Testament and they don't really know the history of what was going on in the Old Testament. You have to understand the old and the new, right? Let's dive into it through the spirit. Let's go to the mighty book of 2 Kings. This is 2 Kings chapter 17. And I'm going to start at verse number 24. And I'm going to pull up this map through the spirit, right? The captivity of Israel and Judah. So right here in the purple, it says Assyrian takes Israel into captivity, right? Around 722. And we spread abroad all throughout Assyria, right? In different parts of Nineveh and places like that during that exile when we went into it. Under Tiglath-Pileser III, when you actually go into it, right? In Saigon II, right? But that's going to it. It's the book of 2 Kings, chapter 17, and verse number 24. And the king of Assyria brought men from Babylon, and from Cuthah, and from Avah, and from Hamath, and from Sepharim, and placed them in the cities of Samaria. So the cities of Samaria, the capital of Samaria is what? Let's go to it. Let's go to the book of Isaiah. So this is the capital of the northern kingdom, right? This is Isaiah chapter 7, and I'm going to read verse number 8. For the head of Syria is Damascus, and the head of Damascus is risen, and within 65 years, Ephraim shall be broken, right? That it be not a people, right? So the Lord is explaining, right, how they're going to be broken down. And the head of Ephraim is Samaria. So whenever you see Samaria in the scriptures, it's synonymous with Ephraim and through the northern kingdom. And the head of Samaria is Ramatha, son, and ye shall not believe, right? Surely ye shall not be established. So when it's talking about Samaria, it's going into Ephraim. It's going into the northern kingdom. So it says, and they placed them in cities of Samaria instead of the children of Israel. So the children of Israel were removed out of that land partially. You know, a lot of that northern kingdom was moved out of that land. You had a lot of heathens that came in that land. And they supposed, so like Samaria, and they possessed Samaria and dwelt in the cities thereof. Right? So even during the time all the way back, right, to the northern kingdom, right around 722, right, we were removed out of our land into uttermost parts of the earth during this captivity. Right, I want to prove that it's going into that. Let's get the mighty book at 2 Kings chapter 16. Let's go to 2 Kings chapter 16, and let's start at verse number 7. It says, so Ahaz, right, sent messengers to Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, saying, I am thy servant and thy son. Come up and save me out of the hand of the king of Syria. Right, so he went a confederacy to link up with these different kings that he may not be taken down. Now, when you go through this history, this is the Ephro-Syrian wars, Ephraimite-Syrian wars that you can read about in Isaiah, the 7th chapter. He went up, which he wouldn't and shouldn't have done, because Isaiah the prophet told him otherwise. He rebelled through fear, ignorance, and just not pure rebellion against the Most High to cleave unto these other nations. Now, Syria and Assyria, right, they literally didn't do anything but further the affliction and further drive them away, you understand, to destruction. And out of the hand of the king of Syria, Slakia Israel, which rise up against me. It says, and Asa took the silver and the gold that was found in the house of the Lord and the treasure of the king's house, and sent it for a present to the king of Assyria. And that's off. Right, so he's taking gold, he's taking silver, he's taking things that belong into our temple, right, into our God, and giving it as a tributary and a gift unto the king of Syria. Now, who is this man? Let's go to the mighty book, right, of 2 Kings. Right, matter of fact, let's go to 2 Chronicles. Let's go to 2 Chronicles chapter 28, and I'm going to start at 16. It says, at that time did King Asa send unto the kings of Assyria to help him, right? Because he was scared and frantic. Like I said, when you go back to the book of Isaiah, the 7th chapter. For the Edomites came and smitten Judah and carried away captives. The Philistines also invaded the cities of the low country and the south of Judah. So we're getting invaded by the Philistines, right? And the Edomites came up and smitten Judah, and all hell was breaking loose during this time, and had taken Bethshemesh and Alondra and Geritha and Shucho with the villages thereof, and Tanah with the villages thereof, Genzo also the villages thereof, and they dwelt there. So who's dwelling there? All of these different nations. They smit parts of our land, and now they're inhabiting it and dwelling there. For the Lord brought Judah low because of Hazah, king of Israel, for he made Judah naked. Making them naked is making them bare, making them in sin, and transgressor against the Lord. And Tiglath-Pileser, when you go into the history, this is the third king of Assyria, came into him and distressed him, but strengthened him not. So he never built him up like he thought he was. I kind of quoted it, but let's go to it real fast for the sake of edification. Let's go to Isaiah chapter 7. This is Isaiah chapter 7 in verse number 1. And it came to pass in the days of Uzziah, right, the son of Jotham, the son of Uzziah, king of Israel, so like a king of Judah that risen, king of Assyria, right? Syria, Pekah, the son of Remelah, king of Israel, went up toward Jerusalem to war against it, but could not prevail against it. And it was told the house of David, saying, Syria is confederate with Ephraim, right? So Syria is confederate, meaning they're joining an alliance in war with Syria. It says, and his heart was moved, and the heart of this people as the trees of the wood are moved with the wind. Then saith the Lord unto Isaiah, go forth now to meet Uzziah, right? Thou and Shithjebel, thy son, at the end of the conduct and the upper pool and the highway of the fuller's field. And say unto him, take heed and be quiet, fear not. So the Lord's telling him not to be overly afraid, not to be scared, not to be frantic, not to join alliance with Tiglath-Pileser III and the Assyrians to join in the alliance to fight up against your own people, right? Israel. It says, neither be faint-hearted for these two tales, right, of these smoking firebands. For the fierce anger of risen with Syria and the son of Remeloth, because Syria, Ephraim, and the son of Remeloth have taken evil counsel against thee, saying, let us go up against Judah and vex it. Let us make a breach therein for us and set a king in the midst of it, even the son of Tabeel. Right? So they're counseling against their own people. You got the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom going up with this war, right? Hating one another, joining an alliance with the heathens. Right? One with Syria and the other one with Assyria when you're going into it. Let's go to the mighty book of Second Chronicles, chapter 28, and verse number 20 again. And Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, came unto him and distressed him, but strengthened him not. So he thought he was going to join an alliance and somehow be saved or have an army, but he never got strengthened the way he thought he was going to get strengthened. For Asa took away a portion out of the house of the Lord, right, which is the silver, the gold, and all of the precious things, and out of the house of the king and of the princes, and gave it unto the king of Assyria, but he helped him not. And that's exactly what happened. Now, this is the northern kingdom in Israel. Now, how do we know that it's specifically talking about Tiglath-Pileser and Saigon II and these different men during this time? Let's go to Second Kings, right? And we're going to dive into it. Hit that history. 17 and verse number 1. It says, in the 12th year of Uzziah, king of Judah, began Hoshea, the son of Elah, to reign in Samaria over Israel 9 years. Right? So over 9 years, right? During this time, you had, like it says, Asa, the king of Judah, began Hoshea, right? The son of Elah, to reign during this time. Now, when you jump down to verse 4, it says, and the king of Assyria found conspiracy in Hoshea, and he sent messengers to So king of Egypt, and brought no present to the king of Assyria, right? Because once you get taken down, you owe tributary, right? Then you have to give, right, all the time, your gold, your silver. That's the very reason why the king set up against Hezekiah and all hell broke loose. And the Lord had to send down that angel to smite 185,000 of those Assyrians because he wasn't paying tributary, right, to the king. Right? It says, as he had done year by year. So year by year, it's like paying taxes. And you have to pay taxes. We have to pay taxes year by year, right? Living in America. Right? We have to give the fruit of our labor and the things that we have, right, to the so-called white man. Right? And whoever conquers you, it's the same type of spirit. Therefore, the king of Assyria shut him up and bound him in prison. Then the king of Assyria came up throughout all the land and went up to Samaria and besieged it 3 years. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria took Samaria and carried Israel away into Assyria and placed them in Halah and the Shalakia Hobar and the rivers of Gozan and the city of the Medes. Right? So you had heathen that came in that land, right, in Samaria. And parts of the northern kingdom went up, right, during that time. I'm going to get the map again, into all parts of Assyria. And this is a very small, short, right, amount of a diaspora that happened, right, with the northern kingdom. But I want to touch on during the time of the Jews, right, when we were spread, right, because contrary to popular belief, we wasn't always together. When you read the scriptures, it may appear that all Israel went into captivity during this time, and all Israel went into captivity during this time, and all Israel, we weren't always together, right? Some of us spread, some of us went over here, some of us went over there. When you actually go into history and you actually go through the precepts. Now I want to read this real fast. Now this is the Babylonian captivity at Britannia.com, right? It says historians agree that several deportations took place, each result of an uprising in Palestine. Not that not all Jews were forced to leave their homeland. That returning Jews left Babylon, right, at various times, and that some Jews chose to remain in Babylon, thus consulting the first numerous Jewish communities living permanently in a diaspora. Right now, I want to get that word. Right, let's go to this real fast. Diaspora, the Salakia, dispersion of Jews amongst the Gentiles after the Babylonian exile. Because you had certain Jews, they removed into Babylon. You had certain Jews that were the poor of the land, they stayed behind. Right? When you actually go into Ezekiel 17, when you actually go into 2 Kings, the 24th chapter, 17 all the way down. When you go to Jeremiah chapter 40, verse 4 all the way down, Jeremiah chapter 39, 11 all the way down, Jeremiah chapter 27, and 1 all the way down. These are various precepts, books, and chapters that can explain how some of Israel, which is the Jews, went to Babylon and certain of them stayed behind. And as some of them went to Babylon, they actually went to the uttermost parts of the earth during that time, while some stayed behind. Right? You had many different exiles. Right? Even with the so-called white man, it wasn't just one big ship. Everybody got on the one big ship. And in this one big ship, he just took us all. There were many exiles. There were many shipwrights. Right? I don't want to touch on that. It says, after the Babylonian exile, right, it says Jewish communities, right, we know the Jews, scattered in exile outside Palestine, right, present-day Israel, although the term refers to a physical diaspora of Jews throughout the world. It also carries religious, right, philosophical, practical, right? Now, we're not dealing with all of that. But nevertheless, it says what? The ingathering of exiles. So I want to touch on that a little bit more. The first significant Jewish diaspora, right? You want to look up that word. All right, let's look up that word real fast through the Spirit for brothers that may not know what that means. All right. Let me get that real fast.
Diaspora.
It says the spread of a people from their original homeland, right? So that's exactly what was going on many of times, all throughout the captivities. And through multiple captivities, we didn't just stay in the same spot. We spread. When you go into that history, right, going back to it, it says the first significant Jewish diaspora was the result of the Babylonian exile in 586 BCE. After the Babylonians conquered the kingdom of Judah, parts of the Jews' population were deported into slavery. Why does it say parts of them? Let's go into the history and let's find out. Let's go to the scriptures. Let's go to the mighty book of 2 Kings. But I quoted these precepts, but I want to pull them through the Spirit. Right? It's the mighty book of 2 Kings chapter 24, right? And I'm going to start at verse number 15. And he carried away Chokachin, right, to Babylon, and the king's mother, and the king's wives, and his officers, and the mighty of the land, right, who's carried he into captivity from Jerusalem to Babylon, and all the men of might, even 7,000, and craftsmen and smiths 8,000, and that were strong and apt for war, even them the king of Babylon brought captive to Babylon. So it didn't say everybody. Key words like what? Men of war, men of might, men of strength, the craftsmen, right? The artificer, right? All of these different men, right, that were strong, that could build up a kingdom and help a kingdom, those men were taken down. You think when a so-called white man is drafting for war, he's trying to draft the weak, the poor, the feeble, men that don't have app and strength. No, he's want to take down the most strongest and get those type of men to join his army. Right? The same way, if you're going to take down a nation, you don't really desire to take down the weak of them. You want to take down the strong of them. Right? You don't really care too much about the feeble. Right? So when the king of Babylon came, right, Nebuchadnezzar II, right, to destroy Israel and take down the Jews, right, he chiefly took those men of might and those men of strength. And he took the elders, right, meaning the men of understanding. And he took the prophets. But I want to take this real fast. Let's go to the mighty book of Ezekiel. All right, let's get a precept on that. It's the book of Ezekiel, chapter 17. And I'm going to start at verse number 6. Right? I mean, this whole thing is fire. I'm going to start at 6. And it grew and became a spreading vine of low stature, or whose branches turned toward him, talking about Israel. And the roots thereof were under him. So it became a vine and brought forth branches and shot forth sprigs. Right? It didn't bring forth fruit. When we get bring to these different lands, it's not for our prosperity and our health and our welfare. It's for captivity, destruction, and to be an oxen, right? To help bring forth, right, anything that nation needs. It says, I'm going to jump down to verse number 8. And it was planted in a goodly soil by great waters, that it might bring forth branches, that it might bear fruit, that it may be a goodly vine. Say thou, thus saith the Lord, shall it prosper? Shall he not pull up the roots thereof and cut off the fruit thereof, that it wither? It shall wither in all the leaves of the springs, even without great power, or many people to pluck up by the roots thereof. Yea, behold, being planted shall it prosper. Shall it not utterly wither when the east wind toucheth it? It shall wither in the furrows where it grew. So the Lord is saying, we're not going to grow. We're not going to continue to prosper. Jumping down to verse 12. Say now, the rebellious house, know ye not what these things mean? Tell them, behold, the king of Babylon has come to Jerusalem, that he have taken the king thereof and the princes thereof and led them into Babylon. Where did it say everybody? It didn't say everybody. It said the princes, right? The officers, the king's mother, right? All of the men of war, the craftsmen. These are the chief men are getting taken down in a Babylonian captivity, taken down to be slaves. When we get our slaves, most are willing, we don't want the guy at the liquor store, man, that's ringing you up, man. We could care less about him. We want the Donald Trumps, the Joe Bidens, right? That's even in Psalms, right? Psalm chapter 149 and verse 5 all the way down. The kings of the earth, right? In the book of Isaiah, right? Chapter 49 and verse 23 all the way down. These kings of the earth are going to have to bow down. So the kings and the chief ones is what these nations desire and what we're going to desire. Right? Let me get another precept. Let's go to the book of Isaiah. Matter of fact, let me go to Jeremiah. Let's go to Jeremiah chapter 29. Right? It's Jeremiah chapter 29, and I'm going to start at verse 1. It says, now these are the words of the letter that Jeremiah the prophet sent from Jerusalem unto the residue of the elders which were carried away captives. So Jeremiah, he was writing up letters to communicate with the elders when those elders were taken and taken into captivity, into Babylon. Now, Jeremiah, when you actually go into it, I want to dive into that history too, how he had the opportunity to stay in the land or be taken captive. It says, into the residue of the elders which were carried away captives, and to the priests and to the prophets and to all the people whom Nebuchadnezzar carried away captive from Jerusalem to Babylon. It didn't say everybody. And during that time, when they got spread, the Lord said that they will be spread throughout the uttermost parts of the earth. So a lot of these different kings and a lot of these priests and these prophets, they aren't all going to be in the United States. They aren't all going to be in one spot, right? Even during this time, right? 539 or so BC, from 605, when you go into the history, they were spread abroad. The elders, right? The priests, the prophets, these men make up a nation, right? The average Joe that's just planting his vineyard, not that he's not important, but he doesn't make up the nation. He doesn't set the roots and the gates, right, for our people. It says, and after that joking, and the king and the queen and the eunuchs, right? The queen meaning the king's mother, and the eunuchs and the princes of Judah, right, in Jerusalem, and the carpenters and the smiths were departed from Jerusalem. What do your carpenters do? Right? They make chairs, tables, right? They furnish buildings, they get things together, right? They help build temples, right? You have the smiths that make swords, weaponry, bucklers, right? Shields, helmets. It says by the hand of Elash, the son of Shapha, right? And Germana, the son of Hilkiah, whom Zedekiah the king of Judah sent unto Babylon to Nebuchadnezzar the king, saying, thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, unto all that I carried away captive, whom I have caused to be carried away, whom Jerusalem unto Babylon. Build ye houses and dwell therein. Plant gardens and eat the fruit of them. Take ye wives and beget sons and daughters, and take wives for your sons, and give your daughters to husbands, that they may bear sons and daughters, that ye may be increased there and not diminished. So the same way we went into Egypt, we grew into a great multitude. During the Babylonian captivity, we grew, but we grew as a vine, as a low stature, like it says in Ezekiel, the 17th chapter. We came to America, right? Right, over 2+ million Jews. And now look at us. Well, we're a great multitude. We've taken over all of the coast, right? All the way from Texas, all the way up to New York, right? And even the 13 colonies when you go into it, right? The so-called 50 states and the 13 colonies from Rhode Island all the way down, right? We have grown as a people. It says, and seek peace of the cities whether I have caused you to be carried away captive, and pray unto the Lord for it, for in the peace thereof shall ye be peace. Right? Let me get this quick precept. Right, I want to get Jeremiah, right? Chapter 39. All right, this is the mighty book of Jeremiah, chapter 39. And I'm going to start at verse number 11. Right, and it reads, I'm going to start at 10. I'm going to start at 9. Then Nebuchadnezzar, captain of the guard, carried away captive into Babylon the remnant of the people that remained in the city. Because they had multiple voyages, right? It wasn't just one, right? Let me get that real fast. The Babylonian captivity or Babylonian exile was the period in Jew history during which a large number of Judeans from the ancient kingdom of Judah were forcibly relocated, right? Put into captivity by Neo-Babylonian, right, empire, right? The deportation occurred in multiple waves after the siege of Jerusalem in 97 BCE. Around 7,000 individuals, right, deported to Mesopotamia. Further deportations, right, followed the destruction of Jerusalem and Solomon's temple in 587. Right, so there were multiple relocations and multiple waves during multiple times. Right, so during this time, it says, and those I fell away and fell to him, the rest of the people that remain. But Nebuchadnezzar, the captain of the guard, left of the poor of the people. So he left the poor of the people, which had nothing in the land of Judah, and gave them vineyards and fields at the same time. And Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, gave charge concerning Jeremiah to Nebuchadnezzar, the captain of the guard, saying, take him and look well to him. So while they're being governed, right, by the Babylonian captivity and these different captains over these regions, over this empire, right, Nebuchadnezzar is telling him, right, his captain, to look well unto Jeremiah. It says, and to do him no harm, but do unto him even as he shall say unto thee. Meaning he had a proposition. He could stay under the Babylonian hand, you understand, and go into Babylon and he'll be looked well, or he could stay into the land of the poor of the land. It was Jeremiah's decision when you go into it. Let's go to Jeremiah chapter 40 and verse 1. It says, the word that came to Jeremiah, right, from the Lord, after that Nebuchadnezzar, the captain of the guard, had let him go from Ramoth, when he had taken him, being bound in chains, right? So he let him go, right, and carried him away captive to Jerusalem, right, and Judah, and were carried away captive into Babylon. It says, and the captain of the guard took Jeremiah and said unto him, the Lord thy God hath pronounced this evil upon this place. Now the Lord have brought it and have done according to as he has said, because ye have sinned against the Lord and have not obeyed his voice. Therefore this thing has come upon you. It's the point. And now behold, I loose thee this day from the chains which were upon thy hand. If it seem good unto thee, come with me unto Babylon. So he said, look, if it seems good unto you, the land is too poor, you don't really know what to do, right? You want to come and have us look well to you, have an army, protection, whatever the case may be. Hey, come to Babylon. I'll look after you, right? If it seems good to you, come and I will look well unto thee. But if it seem ill unto thee to come with me into Babylon, meaning if you don't want to, right? Forbear, behold, all the land is before thee. All the land is before thee, meaning what? You can go and stay in the land, whether it seem good and convenient for thee to go, thither go, right? So he said, look, you're free and you could do whatever you want to do, because there were certain Jews that remain, certain Jews that were let go. Right, now let's jump down to verse number 11. Likewise, when all the Jews that were in Moab and among the Ammonites and in Edom that dwelt in all the countries. So there were Jews that were poor left in the land. There were Jews that went to Babylon, and there were Jews that were around Moab, the Ammonites, and Edom. It says, heard that the king of Babylon left a remnant of Jews, right? And that he had set over them Gilaloth, right? The son of Akim, the son of Shaphan, even all Jews returned out of, so like in all places, whether they were driven. So they were driven to Moab, Ammonites, Edom. They were driven to all of these different places. So when you going into this, yeah, it didn't just start to where we just ended up certain places, right? When you read Isaiah 11 and 11 and, Isaiah chapter 53, it's like at 58 and all of these other, different 56, right? Going into all Israel and the remnants and different places like that, right? It all started from the time of the Assyrian captivity. It started during the Babylonian captivity, right? The so-called Jewish diaspora. And then it goes all the way to the Greek captivity. Now, from the Greek time, right, I'm going to touch on that as well. That's how we ended up in Turkey. Right? He didn't just blink and it was the New Testament. And now, Paul is in Turkey. And how did the Israelites get there? They got there under the Seleucid Empire, right? During that time, when Seleucus took down Ptolemy, right? In different parts of Egypt and where we were, and we fled during that time, the Maccabean revolt. When you're going into that, most I really, we're going to touch on that through the Spirit. It says, heard that the king of Babylon had left a remnant of Judah, and that he had set over them Galath, the son of Akim, the son of Shaphan. Even all Jews returned out of all places, whether they were driven, and came to the land of Judah, to Galath, right, Gedaliloth, and to Mespah, and gathered wine and summer fruits very much, right? So they're coming from these different spots where they were driven and taken in captivity. Now I want to touch on something real fast, right? Shalaki, bear with me. It says Seleucians marched on Anatolia. Now, Anatolia is a different part, or a different word rather, to say for Turkey, right? So during the Seleucid Empire, when you're going into it, right, the Seleucians, right, under Seleucia, you had Ptolemy took down parts of Egypt. You had Seleucus, which took down parts of Mesopotamia and Asia. You had Lycomachus that took down Thrace. You had Castellandir, which took down Macedon. Right, so during this time, it says the Seleucians march on Anatolia, which is different parts or part of Turkey, taking it from Lycomachus and killing him. Seleucus was now the last remaining of the Diadochi. Right now, the Diadochi is going into the Diadochi Wars when they were fighting over land, right, during that time. The Syrian Wars, right, the 5th Syrian War, right, the 6th Syrian War, and different Syrian wars during that time to get that land. Right, let me get that real fast. You could kind of go into that when you read Daniel, the 11th chapter, Daniel 11 and 11, 11 and 12, all the way down going into those Syrian wars. All right, it says the 4th war, 219 to 17, right, and indicated, let me see. Yeah, this might be a better link right here. It said the Syrian wars with the Diadochis were the series of 6 wars between the Seleucid Empire and the Ptolemaic Empire, right? King of Egypt. Successor states, right? Alexander the Great, his empire during the 3rd and 2nd century, right? So after Alexander gave up the ghost, right, through what they would call syphilis and different sick, sexual diseases, right? His kingdom was split between those 4 generals. Those men conquered those spots, which we touched on earlier. And then you had what they call the Diadochi Wars or the Assyrian Wars. Now, during this time, right? Where is it? Let me get this real fast. It says right here, this is the guide, right? It says later Asia Minor, Anatolia, which is Turkey, now Turkey, became home to numerous Jewish communities. Now we know that's talking about the Israelites. A Hellenistic kingdom called the Seleucians settled 2,000 Jewish families. So under this empire, during the Seleucid time, right, when Seleucus took down Ptolemy, rose up in power, and started to inhabit all of these different parts, when you go into it, Seleucus Nicator, he also took down all of these different places, right, that stretched from these different empires as he conquered them, right? And it reads, let me go back to it, Salaki, bear with me. It says the kingdom called the Seleucians settled 2,000 Jewish families. And in Pargaria, Lydia, in 240 BC, Paul's family was probably settled in Tarshish. So they fled and they settled, right, over 2,000 Jews. Now this is during the what they call the Old Testament, right? Right during the time of the Apocrypha. So even during this time, they fled, and some Jews, they went into Egypt. When you read 2nd Maccabees, the 1st chapter, right, certain Jews, they fled, right, over 2,000 of them, right, during the time of the so-called, right, Maccabean revolt, or what, the scholars will call it, and they went up in different parts of Turkey. It says, in a circular letter sent by consultant Lucian, recorded in 1st Maccabees 15 and 16 through 24, mentions numerous communities in Asia Minor. How Turkey is mentioned in the Bible, the Jew people, although the architectural remains of the 3 synagogues found in Turkey, right, Sargis, Prom, and Artemis, all date after 4C, 4 AD, after synagogues are known from the literary evidence. Right, so I'm gonna read up a little bit more on this. It says the 3 great apostles, Peter, Paul, and John, are all linked with the church in Asia Minor called Turkey, as we looked in the Bible, and number of references in Anatolia, regions and cities of the Old Testament and the Apocrypha. Right, so when you going into it, the early church, right, and the 7 churches, when you go to Revelation, it's all really based around Turkey. Right, and I'm going to pull up this other link. Right. Now, this is Alexandria, which is a city in Egypt, a major city and urban in Egypt, once among the great cities of the Mediterranean world and the Greek Hellenistic scholarship and science. Alexander was the capital of Egypt, and from its founding in Alexander the Great. So what does this have to do with anything? It all goes back during the Greek Empire. because that's during that Hellenistic period where we spread and the diaspora happened even during the time of the Greek Empire, right? During Alexandria. Let me get a precept. Let's go to the mighty book of 2nd Maccabees, chapter 1. This is 2nd Maccabees, chapter 1 and verse 1. The brethren, the Jews that be at Jerusalem in the land of Judea, wish unto the brethren, the Jews that are throughout Egypt, health and peace. Because like we saying, when you're going into the history, a lot of Jews, they fled up into Alexandria in Egypt, and they settled and they had communities. God be gracious unto you, and remember this covenant that he made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and his faithful servants, and give you all in the heart to serve him and to do his will with good courage and a willing mind. What is this saying? The brethren, the Jews that be at Jerusalem and in the land of Judea, wish unto the brethren, the Jews that are throughout Egypt. So we as a people will often send letters, right? We just read that in the book of Jeremiah, the 27th chapter. Jeremiah was sending letters, right? Paul sent letters. John sent letters, epistles to the 7 churches. So these epistles and these letters, it was well known that our people were spread and had made communities, whether 2,000, whether 5,000, whether some in the poor of the land, whether big, you understand, going to these different captivities. It was all known that during these times, we spread in these different places. I'm going to jump down to verse 10. And in the 104th year, the people that were at Jerusalem and Judea and the council of Judah sent greetings and health to Aristobulus, king of Ptolemais, master, who was of the stock of the appointed priests, and to the Jews that were in Egypt. Let's go to this. Now it says the culture, right? Jewish culture, right? It says ish because they try to hide who we actually are. And we're the real Jews. It says the Greek-speaking Jews of Alexandria were familiar with the works of the ancient Greek poets and philosophers and acknowledged their universal appeal, right? Now I want to jump down a little bit through the spirit, right? It says the basis of Jewish Hellenistic literature was a Septuagint and Greek translation of the Bible, which became the cornerstone of New World culture. The apologetic, right, tendency of the Jewish Hellenistic culture is clearly discernible in a Septuagint. Alexandria Jewish literature sought to be expressed, right? The Jewish Hellenistic culture and the Jews, so like I'm scanning through the spirit, bear with me. Could scroll up a little bit more. During the period of the Second Temple, the Jews of Alexandria were dispersed in Jerusalem by a sizable community. So during the time of the Second Temple, that's the Alexandrians, right, from Jerusalem. And a lot of our people, they want to flee into Egypt. They fled into Egypt during the time of Jeremiah 42 and 14 all the way down, and various other precepts, to the point where the Lord had to break the arm, right, of us going into there and have the sword continue to flee and pursue us in the land of Egypt. So we always were in the land of Egypt. I want to read this too. I don't want to jump the gun, but I want to touch on this. It says, let me see. So like you bear with me. It says, on Caligula's death, the Jews armed themselves after receiving support from their fellows, the Jews in Egypt. Israel fell upon the Greeks. The revolt was suppressed by the Romans, and Emperor Claudius restored the Jews of Alexandria the religious and national rights which they had been deprived at that time, and the rights forbade them to claim any extension of their citizenship in 66 CE. Influenced by the outbreak of war, the Jews of Alexandria rebelled against Rome. The revolt, crushed by Tiberius Julius Alexander, and 50,000 Jews were killed. Right, so during that time of the Seleucid Empire, you had to reign all the way into Ptolemy. Now, when the Romans took over, they took over all of the parts of the Greek Empire too. Now, during that time of that Greek Empire that spread, that peeled over into parts of Turkey, Syria, and other parts where Israel was. That's why it was governed under that Roman Empire. Now, all of Israel wasn't in Israel or Judea during the time of the New Testament. They were in Turkey, they were in Syria, they were in different parts of that. Now, I'm going to read this real fast. Right? It says Jews settled in Alexandria at the beginning of the 3rd century BCE. According to Josephus, already the time of Alexander the Great. So we were already in these different parts during the time of the Greek Empire. At first, they dwelt in the eastern sector of the city, near the sea, but during the Roman era, 2 of its 5 quarters, partially the 4th Delta quarter, were inhabited by the Jews, and synagogues existed every part of the city. The Jews of Alexandria engaged in various crafts and commerce. Right, so during that time, we were already there. Right, let me get this quick point real fast. Another quick point. Right, the Jewish communities lived in Alexandria. This community, numbering the tens of thousands, partially adopted the Hellenistic culture, including Greek names and used Greek languages. So that Greek culture, it was so deep. That's why when you go to Galatians and there's neither Jew nor Greek, right? He had to really go to these different parts where they were Hellenized, spread from, because they fled after being Hellenized into these different parts. And as they dwelt here and had communities here, they wasn't built up there. They never had no synagogues. Paul had to travel from Tarshish and the places that he was to come down to school to Jerusalem. He wasn't born and raised up, and no, he was free. He was a free man. So he had to travel and come all the way down to Jerusalem and different parts where he could be built up, could go to these schools and could get understanding. So these different so-called Jews, right, and these Gentiles that were spread abroad, a lot of them didn't know what was going on. They were getting taken advantage of, right? They were getting tossed to and fro. That's why it was so important for Paul and his ministry to go abroad to teach these Jews. It says daily visit, right, the baths, right, and obsessions was a physical culture, but not all the Jews of Alexandria were Hellenized. Many maintained their own heritage, and the authorities who Hellenism included a policy of religious tolerism, which gave them the right to establish their own, right? Now, like I said, I don't got to necessarily read all of this, but during 170 BCE, right, when you go into the history, I want to just read this real fast. High priest Onias, right, the third was murdered in Antioch. His son Onias fled into Egypt, where he built a peasant replica of the temple in Jerusalem. In Egypt, an Egyptian city in Helenopolis, which stood for about 240 years. All right, so during this time, we were in Egypt during the Greek time, and we fled up into Turkey. Let me get this real fast. All right, let me get a quick precept. Let's go to the mighty book of Acts. All right, and I'm going to dive into the New Testament. Let's go to the mighty book of Acts, chapter 11. Now, what kicked off a large amount of Israelites going into Turkey in the New Testament was what? Was the persecutions. Now, the persecutions arise under Emperor Nero, right? The one that beheaded and killed Paul, right? So when you're going into that history, it was a large amount of persecutions going on after the fire of Rome. The fire of Rome kicked off where they threw on that the Israelites were the one that started that fire, and they became enemy of the states. And then they started to persecute all Christians. Christians being not a good term during that time. Christian meaning follower of Christ, the anointed one, Yahweh Shah. So if you were classified as a Christian in the New Testament, that meant you followed Yahweh Shai, meaning you were an enemy of the state, meaning you were the ones that their persecution followed. So being a Christian isn't what you make it out to be. Yeah, it's a follower of Christ, right? And that's what they viewed it as, but it was more of a destruction of what? That persecution wave that kicked off, starting during the time of Stephen, right? Killed by his own people, man, right? Let me get this quick precept. the book of Acts, chapter 11 and verse 19. And it reads, says, now they which were scattered abroad upon the persecution. Why does it say that Jews were scattered abroad upon the persecution? That's how we ended up in a lot of these places, because we were fleeing persecution during this time. During that time. Now, what is that time? Right, let me go into the history. The Great Fire of Rome, right, began in 18th, right, of July, 64 AD. The fire began a merchant shop in Rome's chariot and a stadium, right, Circus Maximus, right, which is an ancient Roman racehorse, right, place. After 6 days, the fire was brought under control. But let's jump down to the point. It says, Emperor Nero blamed the disastrous on the Christian community. There's no such thing as the Christian community. The Christian community are the Israelites. And the cities, right, intending the empire first persecution against the Christians. So this kicked off the first persecution wave, which really started around the first century. And it kicked off, and it was a big wave. It says other contemporary historians blame Nero's incompetency, but it's common agreed by historians now that Rome was so tightly packed, a fire was inevitable, right? So, I mean, you couldn't stop it. So they blamed this on the Israelites, the persecution of Christians in the Roman Empire. Christians were persecuted throughout the Roman Empire beginning the first century. So during this time, Roman Colosseums, they were killing Israelites. They were feeding them to lions. They were burning them alive. You had the 40 martyrs of Sabian, right, that were stripped naked and thrown outside in the cold, right, when you actually go into the history, for to be freezed to death. So they were doing these persecutions in these waves. It says, in the ending of the 4th century, originally a polytheistic empire and a tradition of the Roman paganism and the Hellenistic religion of the Christians spread throughout the empire. It came into the ideology conflict, right, with the impartial cult of ancient Roman. The pagan practices such as making sacrifices and defiled emperors of other gods were abhorred to the Christians as they believed prohibited idolatry, right? So they started to beef one to another, and things started to really kick up, right? Now, I said I want to touch on this too, but this is Turkey, where the 7 churches are: Laodicea, Philadelphia, Sardis, Thrace, Pergamos, right, Smyrna, and Ephesus, right, and Anatolia, right? That's what it is when you read the New Testament, right? Let me go back to these precepts through the Spirit. It says, now they which were scattered abroad upon the persecution that arose about Stephen traveled as far as Phineas, right, to Cyprus and Antioch, preaching the word, but only, it's like unto the Jews only. So they're only teaching unto the Jews. Now, when you go into church history, and I'm going to pull this up real fast. Brothers going to have to bear with me. I'm going to have to find this real fast that I'm looking for. And I'm going to go into the history of a lot of our forefathers, right? Just like Matthew, Peter, Paul, how these men, spread and went into these different places. Why did they go into these different places? The Lord commanded them to. When you go read the book of Matthew, let me get this quick precept and I'm going to go into the history. This is Matthew chapter 28, verse 18. He told them to on a great commission. It says, and Yahushua came and spake unto them, saying, all power was given unto me in heaven and in earth. Go ye therefore and teach all nations. The all nations isn't just talking about during that Greek Empire. We were spread through all nations, right? You had the Roman persecution wave under Nero, the fire of Rome. You had the Seleucid during the Seleucid Empire, after Seleucus took down Ptolemy, right? And we settled over 2,000 Jews in these different parts, right? You had the so-called Jewish diaspora all the way in Babylonian captivity, right? When you read those precepts we went into earlier, the latter end of Jeremiah, as we were spread even during that time, the poor, the rich, the nobles, the kings, the princes, we were all throughout these different regions all the way during that time. How much more during the Silk Road slave trade, right? And all of these different slave trades, right? It says, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and of the Holy Ghost. Right now, that's going to it. I want to touch on Matthew real fast. Because Matthew, he furthered his ministry all the way up in Ethiopia. Right? Let's see if I could pull some history into that. It says, let me see. It says, Matthew, with other disciples, Matthew spread Yahweh's message throughout the Middle East. Some extra biblical traditions teach Matthew extended his ministry into Ethiopia, where he was eventually martyred. Right, that's exactly right, because Matthew went all the way up in Ethiopia when you're going into the history. Why? Because he was setting up churches there. He was doing a ministry there. So when it goes into the Acts of the Apostles, how strong the Acts of the Apostles were, that's deep. Because Matthew, all of these 12, they spread, they were martyred and they were killed. But nevertheless, after they got the Great Commission where the Lord said, go teach all nations. And when you go read Mark, the 16th chapter, right, 15 all the way down, and you have power to tread over serpents and nothing by any means can hurt you. And that's exactly what happened. Mark went all the way up in Alexandria, Egypt, right, to teach the word. See if I can pull that up. Right, according to the tradition, in 49 AD, about 16 years after the ascension of Yahushua, Mark traveled into Alexandria and founded the church of the Alexandrians. Because those men were already in that church and already during that time, all the way during the Old Testament. So it's not a new confounding thing how and why he went up into Alexandria to that church during Egypt, during that time, having already been in Egypt 4 to 5 years. So imagine this. A bunch of men have had cities and, 2,000, 3,000, 5,000, 10,000, couple hundred. They spread into these diverse places. And after that, they weren't really established by the Most High as far as having a bishop, a leader, an apostle, or men over them. That's why during the Acts, Paul was setting up these churches. Set up Barnabas, set up Titus, right? He set up Timothy, right, over Ephesus and all of these different places. And Mark, he went to Alexandria, Egypt. Matthew, he went to Ethiopia. And as they're setting up these churches, they're establishing a faith of these men, you understand, that was spread. Now, when you go into, I'm going to touch on this real fast. On his return to Greece, Luke became a bishop in Thuribus and Bethlehem and obtained the priests and deacons, established churches. So Luke wasn't just somebody that just was recording stuff, man. Luke traveled as well. Luke went into Greece. Peter went all throughout Turkey, right? It wasn't just Paul. Even though he was of the circumcision, he still traveled as well, right? I want to get that real fast. Let's go to 1 Peter chapter 1 and verse 1. Who was he even writing to? And Peter did some traveling. Peter wasn't just in Jerusalem, hanging with the Sanhedrin. Right, let's go get that real fast in 1 Peter. So Peter was an apostle. These men were true apostles, and you got to put respect on their name. Yeah, these men are literally handpicked and chosen by Yahweh, by Hashem Yahushua to be leaders, apostles, and men that are setting up these churches, man. A church isn't just coming to you clapping your hands and stomping your feet and the drum set is playing. Setting up the churches is setting up order, community, the laws, governing these places where we were dispersed. 1 Peter chapter 1 and verse 1, Peter, an apostle of Yahushua, to the strangers scattered throughout Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia. Now, all of that's predominantly Turkey when you're going into it, these different regions, right? The Mesopotamia to Turkey, where we went into Seleucus, his empire reached, and then you have Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, right? All of the Bithynia, right? These are parts of Turkey when you're going into it. Elect according to the foreknowledge of God, the Father, throughout sanctification of the Spirit, into obedience and the sprinkling of blood of Yahweh Shai, grace unto you and peace be multiplied. Now let's go into Peter. Peter went into Turkey. All right, see if I can find that through the Spirit. All right, matter of fact, we could just go straight to the scriptures. Let's go to the book of Galatians, the 2nd chapter. That's exactly what Paul was getting on Peter for doing. It's the book of Galatians, right? Chapter 2 and verse 8. It says, I'm going to start at 9. And when James and Cephas and John, right, Peter, who seemed to be pillars, right, getting on them, perceived that the grace was given unto me, they gave me, right, and Barnabas the right hand of fellowship, right, meaning they agreed and understood that they were sanctified to teach the Gentiles, that we should go unto the heathen, right, which are what? Israel scattered abroad, and they unto the circumcision. Only they that would have should remember the poor, the same which I also was forward to do. But when Peter was come to Antioch, right, meaning what? Turkey, I withstood him to the face, because he was to be blamed. So they were all up and down during these regions and during this time. That's why Peter was writing to these men. When you go to the book of Acts, let's go to the book of Acts, chapter 11. I'm going to get this quick precept. And I'm going to start at, let me see, 20. And some of them were men of Cyprus and Cyrene, which when they were come to Antioch spake unto the Grecians. Why are they speaking unto the Grecians when they came to Antioch? Because that's where they fled to. Grecians not meaning that they're actual Greeks, right? Meaning they were Hellenized Jews that were under the spirit, right, of confusion to speak Greek, right, to act in that Greek culture, in that Greek mindset, preaching the Lord Yahweh Shah. That's why they were treated different when you go to the book, right, of Acts chapter 6 and verse 1. That's why it was such an uproar and a division amongst the Jews, right? Let's go to the book of Acts chapter 6 and verse 1. It's the book of Acts chapter 6 and verse number 1, and it reads, it says, in those days when the number of the disciples was multiplied, there arose a murmuring of the Grecians against the Hebrews. Now the Grecians are Israelites, right? They're Jews, they're Grecians, but they're under that Hellenistic mindset. It says against the Hebrews, because the widows were neglected during the daily ministration. And they weren't getting accepted amongst their own people. They didn't speak the same way. They couldn't speak the Hebrew. They wasn't really of that understanding, have that culture and being raised in it like those Jews was. Right? It says, and had of the Lord was with them, a great number believed and turned to the Lord. Then tidings of these things came into the ears of the church, which was in Jerusalem. And they sent forth Barnabas that he should go as far as to Antioch. Right? Read the book, right, of Acts, the 20th chapter, verse 20 all the way down. Right? Even read during the time of Pentecost, right? Acts, the 2nd chapter, where all these Jews from all of these diverse places are coming down to Jerusalem to keep, right, the Pentecost. It says, who, when they were at come, so like when he came, he had seen the grace of God and was glad and exhorted them all with purpose of heart that they should cleave unto the Lord. Let me jump down to verse number, let me see. I'm going to start at 26. And when he had found him, he brought him into Antioch, and it came to pass that a whole year they assembled themselves with the church and taught many people, and taught much people. And the disciples were called Christian first in Antioch, right? They were called Christians first in Antioch, going into that church. Let's go to the mighty book of Acts. I want to get a couple more through the Spirit. Acts chapter 14. It's Acts chapter 14 and verse 21. It says, and when they had preached the gospel to that city and had taught many, they returned against the Lystria and to Iconium and Antioch, confirming the souls of the disciples and exhorting them to continue in the faith, that they must, through much tribulation, enter into the kingdom of God. Right? So they're confirming these churches, setting up these churches, right? Building up these churches, exhorting these churches, letting these churches know that the kingdom of heaven draweth nigh. And keeping in mind, you have to go back of the past and these different empires and able to understand the New Testament. It isn't just who are the Jews and who are the Greeks. It really goes into the spread, going into how all of these Israelites ended up in these diverse places. Really goes back to the Greek Empire and the Babylonian Empire, right? And the Roman Empire during that persecution wave, right? I'm going to get this real fast. Also, all right. Right, Bartholomew. Bartholomew, the apostle, right? He went all the way up in Turkey as well, right? So they're setting up these diverse things. Bartholomew, he went into Asia, right? He went into Turkey, right? You know, Thomas, right? He went all the way up in India. Thomas settled the first church in India. Get that real fast. St. Thomas, right? Presently located. Let me see, is this what I want? Right? St. Thomas, the apostle to us and the Indians, times of India. Right? He set up a church going to India. Because our people were spread abroad in parts of India. Right? During the Perso-Median Empire, right? And other things through the Spirit. All right, we're not going to touch on every single disciple, but during, the Lord telling all of the apostles that they should spread abroad and teach the words of the Most High during the Acts, you understand, all of these things came to pass. That's why this book is so important. It's so mighty. Acts, right? First and Second Maccabees, going into the history, the Babylonian exile, right? All of these things help you link up, right? Going into the New Testament to understand what really took place and why we were spread abroad. Right? But with that, let me get this closing precept through the Spirit. It's the book of Revelation, chapter 3, and verse number 2. Be watchful and strengthen the things which remain that are ready to die, for I have not found thy works perfect before God. Remember therefore how thou hast received and heard, and hold fast, and repent. If therefore thou shalt not watch, I will come in thee as a thief, and thou shalt not know what hour I will come upon thee. So continue to keep watch, continue to be diligent, study to show yourself approved. Right? Continue to go over your notes, do everything you can do to magnify the Most High by Hashem Yahushua. Most High willingness was edifying. Most High willing could come back through the Spirit and do another breakdown, right? Whether it be on common knowledge, prophecy, history, right, or confounding questions. But with that, I'm going to close out giving all honor and glory to the Most High God, Yahweh, by Hashem Mashiach, Malak Yahushua. Shalom.